Michael and Jim start on the exact same Monday. Same age, same job title, same $75,000 salary, same $1,000 they decided to put into the market every single month. One of them is going to check his portfolio 40 times a day for the next 30 years. The other is going to check it 4 times a year. By the time they're 60, one of these men has quietly built well over $1 million more than the other. And it isn't the one you'd expect from watching them at the barbecue. This is the true cost of trying to outsmart the market, told through 2 guys who started with nothing but a plan. Michael and Jim are both 30. They work different jobs across town from each other, but they earn the same money, live in the same tax bracket, and want the same outcome. Real wealth by 60, built one paycheck at a time in an ordinary brokerage account. $1,000 a month, every month for 30 years. That part of the story is identical. What happens to that money is not. Michael decides early on that sitting still is for people who don't understand the market. He downloads 3 different charting apps, sets alerts on his phone that buzz before the opening bell, and starts learning the language of candlesticks and moving averages like it's a second degree. He's in and out of positions the same day, sometimes a dozen times before lunch, chasing the small moves he's convinced everyone slower than him is missing. To Michael, cash sitting in an account isn't safety, it's a wasted opportunity. Jim does the opposite of almost everything Michael does. He picks one broad, low-cost index fund, the kind that quietly owns a slice of hundreds of the biggest companies in the country, and sets up an automatic purchase for the first of every month. He doesn't study charts. He doesn't watch the pre-market. He gets a notification that his money moved, and he goes back to whatever he was doing. If you asked Jim what the market did last Tuesday, he genuinely wouldn't know, and he wouldn't care. Michael's mornings look almost identical for the next 3 decades before he even notices the pattern forming. Alarm at 6:15, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, scrolling through overnight futures before he's even brushed his teeth. He's built a system, or at least he calls it a system. A handful of setups he watches for, a stop-loss he sets, and then quietly moves when it's about to trigger, a running tally in a notes app of wins that always feels longer than the losses column, even when the math says otherwise. He genuinely enjoys it. That part matters because it's part of why he never stops. Jim's mornings look almost identical too, in the opposite way. Coffee, a quick scroll through actual news instead of ticker prices, and a mind that's already moved on to whatever his day actually requires. Once a month, a notification tells him his automatic purchase went through. He glances at it for maybe 4 seconds and gets back to his life. Neither man is lazy. Neither man is careless. They've simply pointed the same discipline in 2 very different directions, and 30 years is a long enough runway for that one difference to be the only thing that ends up matching. For a while, Michael is the one everyone wants to talk to. He's got the stories, the green days, the screenshots he sends to the group chat with a little too much enthusiasm. There are weeks he's up 5%, while Jim's account has barely moved. Michael starts to believe he's found something the rest of the world hasn't. Jim, meanwhile, has nothing interesting to report because "I bought the index again" has never once started a conversation. On the scoreboard Michael checks every night, he's winning. But that scoreboard was never the one that decides who actually retires comfortable. Here's the part Michael can't see from inside his own trades. Every time he closes a winning position, he's created a taxable event, and because he almost never holds anything longer than a year, none of his gains qualify for the lower long-term tax rate. Every dollar he makes gets taxed like a paycheck at his full ordinary rate, the same April every single time. Every trade also carries a small, invisible cost, the tiny gap between what he pays to buy and what he gets to sell, multiplied by hundreds of trades a year. None of it feels like much in the moment. All of it adds up long before Michael notices. About 2 years in, Michael has the run that convinces him he's finally cracked it. The market cooperates, his positions line up, and he closes out 12 straight months where he's beaten Jim, beaten his own expectations, beaten the market itself. He starts running numbers on what it would take to quit his job and trade full-time. This, he tells himself, is proof the whole approach works. Then the following year turns on him. The setups that work stop working. A couple of large positions move hard against him right when he's leaned in the heaviest. And that spring, the tax bill on his big year finally lands, calculated at his full income rate. No discount for the effort he put in. By the time he's paid it and covered his losses, most of what felt like a breakthrough year has evaporated. Michael doesn't read that year as a warning. He reads it as a fluke on the way to the real breakthrough. And that single belief is what keeps him at his desk for the next 27 years. It's worth being honest about why this happens to so many people, not just Michael. Independent research tracking active traders over long stretches has consistently found that only a tiny sliver, often less than 1 in 100, manage to come out ahead after taxes and costs are counted. The large majority lose money outright. Studies following frequent traders have found they trail the broader market by several percentage points a year, year after year, not as a one-time bad stretch, but as a persistent pattern. None of this shows up in a single week's results, which is exactly why it's so easy to miss while you're living inside it. There's also a quieter cost that never makes it into anyone's trading recap, the friction. Every single trade, win or lose, chips away a sliver of value through spreads and small fees. On its own, a fraction of a percent looks meaningless. But when an account gets turned over 10, 15, 20 times a year, that fraction compounds into a real number, a couple of percent of the whole account, gone before a single dollar of actual profit has even been earned. The market doesn't need to beat Michael. His own activity is doing a good chunk of that work for free. And underneath all of it sits the trap that's hardest to see from the inside: overconfidence. People who trade frequently tend to sell their winners too fast, out of fear of losing the gain, and hold their losers too long, hoping they'll come back. A handful of good trades starts to feel like proof of skill when it's far more often luck that happened to show up wearing a convincing outfit. It's worth being fair to Michael here too, because trading isn't a scam and it isn't stupid on its face. A very small number of people genuinely do have an edge, and research on this has consistently found that sliver of consistently profitable traders is real, even if it's razor thin. The problem isn't that skilled traders don't exist. It's that almost everyone who sits down to trade is completely convinced they're one of them, and confidence has never once been evidence, no matter how many good weeks it survives on. If someone is going to trade regardless, doing it inside a tax-advantaged account changes the math meaningfully, since short-term gains inside something like a Roth aren't taxed at all, which removes the single biggest leak in Michael's approach. And there's a real, human reason people trade in the first place that has nothing to do with returns. Doing something feels better than doing nothing, and for some people that sense of control is worth real value. None of that is fake. The mistake isn't wanting that feeling. It's funding that feeling with the exact dollars that are supposed to be building a retirement. Before we go further, let's take a quick pause, because if this kind of honest breakdown of where money actually goes is useful to you, this channel exists to keep doing exactly this. Subscribing costs nothing, and it means the next comparison, the next set of numbers, lands in front of you automatically instead of you having to go looking for it. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the person this channel is built for. So consider hitting that button before we get into how the gap between Michael and Jim actually plays out over 30 years. Now let's talk about why Jim keeps winning without ever appearing to try. The first advantage is tax. Because Jim almost never sells, he almost never triggers a taxable event, which means his money keeps compounding untouched year after year, while Michael hands a chunk of his gains to the government every spring. Deferring tax isn't a minor convenience. It's decades of extra growth stacked on money that would otherwise have left the account early. The second advantage is cost. Jim's single fund charges a tiny fraction of a percent to own, spread across hundreds of companies at once. There's no spread eating into every transaction, because there's barely a transaction to speak of. The third advantage is the historical record itself. Long-running industry data has repeatedly shown that the large majority of professional fund managers, people paid full-time salaries with research teams behind them, fail to beat a simple broad index over any extended stretch. If the professionals can't reliably beat it, the odds were never really in Michael's favor either. The fourth advantage is control. Jim decides when, if ever, he wants to realize a gain and trigger a tax bill. Michael's gains and losses show up on the market schedule, not his own, whether that's convenient for his tax situation or not. That kind of control turns into real money, especially once retirement is close enough that timing starts to matter. Let's watch the actual numbers unfold, because for the first several years, the gap between these two men is genuinely hard to see. By year 2, they're basically indistinguishable on paper. Michael maybe even a touch ahead after one of his hot stretches, which is exactly the window where the story he's telling himself gets locked in. By year 5, Michael's account sits around $62,000. Jim's is close to $74,000. Not a dramatic difference yet. And Michael still has the better stories at every barbecue. So it still feels, to everyone including Michael, like it's roughly a tie. By year 10, the lines have clearly split. Michael is around $130,000. Jim has crossed $190,000. Michael is now nearly $60,000 behind a guy who spends less time on his portfolio in a year than Michael spends on it most Tuesdays. And Michael has no idea, because he's comparing this month to last month, never his account to Jim's. By year 15, it isn't close. Michael sits near $210,000. Jim has passed $370,000. By year 20, Jim has crossed $650,000 while Michael is still under $310,000, meaning the quiet guy now has more than double what the guy working the market like a second job has managed to put together. By year 25, the gap turns almost unfair. Jim is sitting on roughly $1.1 million. Michael has just crossed $400,000. The friend who never checks his phone now has nearly $700,000 more than the friend who's been watching the market every single trading day for a quarter century, with 5 years still left to run, and the steepest part of compounding still ahead of Jim. Picture the two lines on a chart. Michael's is jagged, spiking and dropping and spiking again, a lot of motion that mostly cancels itself out. Jim's line just climbs, slow and almost boring, without a single dramatic moment worth screenshotting. One of those lines is heading somewhere genuinely different than the other. By the time they both turn 60, 30 years in, they've each put in exactly the same $360,000, $1,000 a month, every month without missing one. Here's where they land. Michael, who treated the market like an unpaid second job, ends up around $530,000. Jim, who bought the same fund every month and moved on with his life, ends up around $1.8 million. Jim finishes with more than triple what Michael built, roughly $1.3 million ahead of him. And this is the generous version of Michael's story, the version where he's actually one of the rare traders who came out ahead rather than underwater. Michael didn't end up behind because he wasn't smart. He ended up behind because 3 quiet forces worked against him every day for 30 years. A tax bill on nearly every win, a steady leak of friction on every trade, and the simple, well-documented fact that almost nobody consistently beats a market they're actively fighting. None of it felt like losing on any given Tuesday. Added together, across 3 decades, it cost him well over $1 million he'll never get the chance to earn back. There's one more cost here that never shows up in either man's account balance, and it might be the most expensive one of all, time. Michael spent most of his trading days glued to a screen, plus prep before the open and review after the close, somewhere around 2,000 hours a year. Stretched across 30 years, that's close to 60,000 hours, roughly the equivalent of working an entire second career for 3 decades straight. Jim spent a few minutes a month confirming an automatic purchase happened, plus the occasional glance at his balance, somewhere around 4 hours a year. Over 30 years, that's a little over 100 hours total, about 3 normal work weeks, spread across an entire adult life. Line that up, and it stops looking like a close call at all. The man who effectively worked a second job finished with less money. The man who spent 3 total weeks on his investments finished more than $1 million ahead. Michael didn't just lose money chasing the market. He spent 60,000 hours of his one life buying a result that a few minutes a month would have beaten. So what's the actual takeaway here? Because it isn't simply never trade. The real answer is a lot less exciting than either extreme. And that's exactly why it works. Build the core of your wealth in something broad and low cost during your working years. That's where the math is decisively in your favor. Lower taxes, lower costs, and a long track record that most professionals can't consistently beat. Most of your money, maybe all of it, belongs there. If the itch to trade is real for you, don't pretend it isn't. Set aside a small amount you can genuinely afford to lose completely, something like 5% of your total portfolio, and treat that piece as your playground. Trade it, learn from it, enjoy it, ideally inside an account structure where the tax hit on short-term gains disappears entirely. Just keep it small and keep it separate so that whatever happens there never touches the 95% that's actually supposed to fund your future. And measure yourself honestly. Compare your results to what the plain index did over the same stretch of time. Not to your best single week, not to your best month, and definitely not to the one trade you still bring up at dinner 3 years later. Compare full year to full year, after taxes, after fees, after every cost that quietly leaves the account without ever showing up in a screenshot. Count your hours the same way you'd count dollars, because they're just as real a cost, and unlike dollars, they can never be earned back once they're spent. If you're spending hundreds of hours a year to fall behind a fund you could buy in 10 seconds, that's not really a hobby anymore, no matter how good it feels while you're doing it. There's also a simpler test worth running on yourself before you decide which path fits. Ask what you'd actually be doing with those hours if you weren't trading. For some people, the honest answer is nothing productive at all, in which case the hobby argument holds up fine as long as the money stays small and separate. For other people, that time could go toward a skill, a side income, or simply toward the family and friends they keep meaning to see more of. The dollars are the headline number in a story like this, but they were never the only thing on the table. One more thing worth saying plainly, since it's easy to lose in a story about numbers. None of this means Jim is smarter than Michael, or braver, or more disciplined in some general sense. Jim just picked a system where doing less was structurally the better move, and then he had the discipline to actually leave it alone, which turns out to be its own kind of hard. Michael's discipline went into checking, adjusting, refining. Jim's went into not touching anything at all. Both took effort. Only one of them got paid for it. If you want to see what this looks like with your own income, your own tax bracket, and your own timeline instead of Michael's and Jim's, that's exactly the kind of breakdown worth running for yourself rather than taking anyone's word for it, this channel included. The inputs change the exact dollar figures, but they don't change which direction the gap opens in. Michael and Jim put in the exact same amount of money for the exact same 30 years. One of them spent a second lifetime chasing an edge that barely exists. The other spent 3 weeks and let time do what it does best. The market has never paid extra for effort. Most of the time, for most people, it simply pays for patience, and Jim proved that without ever trying to prove anything at all.